The morning sky over Geneva turned an unnatural shade of silver as the alien ship descended through Earth's atmosphere. People stopped walking, drivers pulled over, and children pressed their faces against classroom windows to watch the impossible sight. The vessel looked like a floating crystal palace, each facet catching sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the clouds. Nobody had expected first contact to happen on a Tuesday. Dr. Emily Watson had been drinking her third cup of coffee when her phone buzzed with 17 missed calls from the United Nations. Now she stood in a hastily converted conference room, watching alien beings materialize from thin air. The technology was beyond human understanding, but the beings themselves looked oddly familiar from science fiction movies, except more elegant and definitely more intimidating. The lead alien stepped forward with movements that seemed choreographed. Its skin looked like polished metal that shifted between blue and purple, and its eyes were large and multifaceted like a dragonfly's. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. People of Earth, I am Tharn of the Corvani Empire. We have observed your species for many cycles and have determined that you have reached the stage where evaluation becomes necessary. The human delegates exchanged nervous glances. Ambassador Rodriguez, who had been chosen to speak for Earth simply because he happened to be at the UN that morning, cleared his throat. Evaluation for what exactly? For membership in the galactic community, naturally. Every species must prove they possess the intellectual capacity required for civilized interaction with the greater universe. Emily noticed how the alien's voice carried a tone of absolute certainty, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Around her, government officials and scientists shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Nobody had prepared for this scenario, despite decades of speculation about first contact. What kind of test are you proposing? Asked Dr. Peterson, a mathematician who had been rushed in from MIT. Tharn quotes expression somehow conveyed both patience and mild condescension. The same test we have administered to every species for the past 1,000 years. The logic grid of supreme understanding. With what appeared to be a casual gesture, Tharn created a holographic display that floated above the conference table. A grid appeared, 9 squares by 9 squares with some positions filled with strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. The symbols were beautiful but incomprehensible, looking like a cross between Egyptian hieroglyphs and mathematical equations. Behold the ultimate expression of logical reasoning, Tharn continued, and his voice took on an almost religious reverence. This puzzle represents the pinnacle of intellectual achievement. It has taken some species decades to master even the basic principles. The Zenthran took 47 years. The Mollusk Confederation required 63. We consider 20 years to be exceptionally quick. Emily studied the grid, trying to understand what made it so special. It looked like some kind of number puzzle, but with alien symbols instead of familiar digits. The rules are elegant in their complexity, Tharn explained. Each symbol must appear exactly once in every row, every column, and every 3 by 3 subsection. No symbol may be repeated in any of these areas. The logic required is substantial. Dr. Peterson leaned forward, his academic curiosity overriding his nervousness. And you're saying this is how you measure intelligence? Not merely intelligence, but the capacity for advanced logical reasoning that separates true civilization from mere tool-using animals. Your species will have 30 of your days to demonstrate competence with this challenge. We will return to evaluate your progress and determine whether humanity deserves a place among the stars. The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. 30 days to prove humanity was worthy of joining a galactic civilization. Emily felt her stomach twist into knots. Tharn gestured again, and several copies of the grid appeared on the table in front of the human delegates. We leave you with these practice examples and detailed instructions. Study them well. The future of your species depends upon your success. As quickly as they had appeared, the aliens vanished, leaving behind only the faint smell of ozone and the holographic grid still floating above the table. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The implications were too enormous to process immediately. Ambassador Rodriguez was the first to find his voice. Well, I suppose we better get started. Within hours, every major university, government research facility, and think tank on Earth had received copies of the alien puzzle. Teams of the world's brightest minds were assembled with one simple mission: solve the logic grid of supreme understanding and save humanity from cosmic rejection. Emily found herself appointed to coordinate the global effort, a responsibility she had never wanted and felt completely unprepared for. As she looked at the strange symbols floating in front of her, she wondered if humanity really was intelligent enough to join a galactic civilization, or if they were about to discover just how primitive they truly were. The clock was ticking, and the future of every human being depended on solving what the aliens claimed was the ultimate test of logical reasoning. Emily picked up her pen and began trying to understand symbols that might determine whether humanity would reach for the stars or remain forever isolated on a single small planet. She had no idea that somewhere in Ohio, a retired school teacher was looking at the same puzzle on her evening news broadcast and thinking it looked suspiciously familiar. Professor Michael Hayes had not slept in 3 days. His office at Cambridge University looked like a hurricane had blown through it, with papers covered in alien symbols scattered across every surface. Coffee cups formed small towers on his desk, and the whiteboard was so covered in equations and theories that he had started writing on the walls. "There has to be something we're missing," he muttered to his research assistant, who looked just as exhausted. These aliens wouldn't make solving this their ultimate test of intelligence if it was simple. There must be hidden layers, mathematical principles we don't understand yet. Across the Atlantic, Dr. Sarah Kim was having similar thoughts at MIT. She had assembled a team of 12 specialists, including experts in game theory, cryptography, and advanced mathematics. They had been working around the clock, treating the alien puzzle with the same intensity usually reserved for national security crises. "Look at the way these symbols interact," she explained to her team during their 4th consecutive 18-hour work session. "There might be prime number relationships, or perhaps the symbols represent complex mathematical functions rather than simple placeholders." The team nodded seriously, making notes and creating elaborate charts that mapped possible relationships between the alien symbols and known mathematical concepts. Nobody questioned whether they might be overcomplicating things. After all, this was supposed to be the ultimate test of intelligence from a species advanced enough to travel between stars. In Moscow, Dr. Volkov had requisitioned an entire floor of the university and filled it with computers running complex algorithms designed to analyze the logical structure of the alien grids. "If we can understand the deeper mathematical principles," he told his government handlers, "we might be able to develop a systematic approach that guarantees success." Similar scenes were playing out in Tokyo, where a team led by Professor Yamamoto had built a room-sized version of the grid using movable panels, allowing them to physically manipulate the symbols while searching for patterns. In London, researchers were working with linguists to determine if the alien symbols contained embedded meaning that might provide clues to the solution method. The pressure was enormous. Every news channel carried updates on humanity's progress, with talking heads debating whether the world's greatest minds were up to the challenge. Government officials made serious statements about the importance of the work, and funding flowed to research teams faster than anyone could spend it. But while the academic elite wrestled with what they assumed must be an incredibly sophisticated challenge, something very different was happening in the everyday world. In a small apartment in Detroit, retired factory worker Bob Martinez was watching the evening news with his wife. The reporter was interviewing a team of professors who were explaining the complexity of the alien challenge and the sophisticated approaches they were developing to solve it. "Looks like a Sudoku puzzle to me," Bob said, reaching for the puzzle book he always kept on the side table. "See? 9x9 grid? Can't repeat symbols in rows or columns. I do harder ones than that every morning with my coffee." His wife, Linda, glanced at the television screen. "Those poor professors are making it way too complicated. My sister Carol could probably solve that thing in 20 minutes. Similar conversations were happening around the world, but nobody was paying attention to them. In São Paulo, taxi driver Carlos Santos looked at the alien grid displayed on his passenger's tablet and wondered why everyone was acting like it was so difficult. He had been solving Sudoku puzzles for years during his breaks, and this looked like the same basic concept with different symbols. In Mumbai, street vendor Rajesh Patel recognized the pattern immediately. He sold puzzle books to commuters every day, and Sudoku was one of the most popular varieties. The alien version looked more decorative, but the fundamental structure was identical. The disconnect between the academic response and the popular recognition was striking, but the experts were too invested in their complex theories to listen to ordinary people. When a few brave souls called universities or government offices to suggest that the alien puzzle might be related to Sudoku, their calls were politely dismissed. How could a simple recreational puzzle possibly be the ultimate test of cosmic intelligence? Meanwhile, the research teams continued their intense work, developing increasingly elaborate theories about hidden mathematical relationships, symbolic logic systems, and advanced pattern recognition techniques. They published papers analyzing the potential quantum mechanical implications of the symbol arrangements and held conferences to debate the possible connection between the puzzle structure and higher dimensional geometry. The irony was lost on everyone involved. While thousands of the world's brightest minds struggled with what they assumed was an impossibly complex challenge, millions of ordinary people were looking at the same puzzle and recognizing something they solved for fun every day. In her small apartment in Phoenix, retired teacher Betty Collins was having her morning coffee and working through the Sudoku puzzle in the local newspaper when her granddaughter called. "Grandma, have you seen this alien puzzle on the news? All the smart people say it's really hard." Betty switched on the television and studied the alien grid for about 30 seconds. "Honey, that's just a Sudoku with pretty symbols instead of numbers. I could solve that right now if someone gave me a pencil." But Betty's voice, like thousands of others, was lost in the noise of academic excitement and governmental panic. The experts were certain they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than a simple puzzle game, and they were prepared to spend weeks or months proving their intellectual worthiness to the galaxy. They had no idea that the answer was sitting in puzzle books, smartphone apps, and newspaper sections all around them, waiting for someone to simply recognize what they were actually looking at. Ana Martinez was having the worst week of her career as a science journalist. Every expert she interviewed gave her the same response. The alien puzzle was incredibly complex, required advanced mathematical training to understand, and might take months for humanity's best minds to solve. The story was important, but it was becoming repetitive and frustrating to cover. That quote S, when her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on her apartment door with a plate of homemade cookies and a complaint. "Anna, dear, I've been watching your reports on the news," Mrs. Chen said, settling into the kitchen chair. "But I think all those professor people are making this much harder than it needs to be." Anna accepted a cookie and tried to be polite. Mrs. Chen was sweet, but she was 82 years old and had worked as a seamstress her whole life. What could she possibly understand about an alien intelligence test that was baffling the world's greatest minds? "The thing is," Mrs. Chen continued, pulling a folded newspaper clipping from her purse, "I printed out one of those alien puzzles from the internet yesterday, and it only took me about 45 minutes to solve. It's really just a Sudoku with fancy symbols." Anna nearly choked on her coffee. "Mrs. Chen, are you saying you solved the alien puzzle?" "Well, yes, dear. It wasn't that difficult once I figured out which symbol was which. I've been doing these puzzles for 20 years. My late husband got me started on them when I retired." Mrs. Chen unfolded the paper, revealing a completed alien grid with penciled notes in the margins. Every symbol was in place, following the logical rules the experts had spent days trying to understand. "Show me how you did it," Anna said, suddenly very interested. For the next hour, Mrs. Chen walked Anna through her solving process, using the same methodical approach she applied to the Sudoku puzzles in her daily newspaper. She explained how to identify obvious placements, eliminate possibilities, and use logical deduction to work through the more challenging sections. "The key is not to think too hard about it," Mrs. Chen explained. "It's just pattern recognition and basic logic. If this symbol can only go in this spot, then you put it there. If putting a symbol here means it can't go there, then you eliminate that possibility. Simple as that." Anna stared at the completed puzzle, her journalist instincts screaming that this was the biggest story of her career. If an 82-year-old, retired seamstress could solve the alien test of ultimate intelligence in less than an hour, using techniques she learned from newspaper puzzles, then every expert in the world was massively overthinking the problem. Mrs. Chen, would you be willing to go on television and demonstrate this? Oh, I suppose so, dear. Though I don't see what all the fuss is about. These puzzles are quite relaxing, really. Within 6 hours, Anna had convinced her news director to give her an emergency primetime slot. Mrs. Chen sat calmly in the studio chair, wearing her best dress and holding a freshly printed alien grid. Anna had verified with puzzle experts that it was indeed an unsolved version of the test. Mrs. Chen, Anna began, you claim that what scientists around the world are calling the ultimate test of intelligence is actually just a common puzzle that millions of people solve for recreation. Can you demonstrate this for our viewers? Of course, dear, Mrs. Chen replied, adjusting her reading glasses and picking up a pencil dot. For the next 28 minutes, live on television, Mrs. Chen methodically worked through the alien grid while explaining her reasoning in simple, clear language. She filled in obvious placements, eliminated possibilities, and used basic logical deduction to arrive at the complete solution. The response was immediate and explosive. Phone lines at news stations jammed with calls from viewers who recognized the solving technique. Social media exploded with posts from people claiming they had solved similar grids but hadn't realized the significance. Sudoku app downloads crashed servers as millions of people suddenly wanted to test their skills against alien logic. In university offices around the world, professors stopped their complex theoretical work and stared at their television screens in stunned disbelief. At Cambridge, Professor Hayes watched the broadcast with his mouth hanging open, surrounded by weeks of elaborate mathematical analysis that had completely missed the point. My God, he whispered, we've been trying to invent advanced theoretical frameworks for something that already exists in every newspaper on the planet. Dr. Kim at MIT called an emergency meeting with her research team. I want everyone to stop what they're doing and go buy a book of Sudoku puzzles. Apparently, we need to learn how to solve these from the ground up. The revelation spread through academic circles like wildfire. Research teams that had been developing complex computer algorithms suddenly realized that simple logical deduction techniques developed by puzzle enthusiasts were far more effective than their sophisticated approaches. But the most significant reaction came from ordinary people who had been watching the academic panic with growing confusion. Retirement homes across the country became unexpected centers of expertise, as residents who had been solving these puzzles for years suddenly found themselves in demand as consultants and teachers. The Sudoku community, a quiet group of puzzle enthusiasts who had never sought attention, suddenly found themselves at the center of the world's most important challenge. Books that had been gathering dust on bookstore shelves became bestsellers overnight. Puzzle magazines that had catered to a niche audience suddenly couldn't print copies fast enough. Within 24 hours of Mrs. Chen's television appearance, thousands of completed alien grids were being submitted to government agencies and universities. The solutions all followed the same basic logical principles that puzzle enthusiasts had been using for decades. The academic establishment faced an uncomfortable truth. They had been outsmarted not by superior intelligence, but by the simple recognition that sometimes the most profound challenges have surprisingly familiar solutions. The ultimate test of cosmic intelligence turned out to be something humans had been doing for fun, while drinking their morning coffee. As news anchors around the world reported this stunning development, one question remained unanswered. If humanity had accidentally mastered the aliens' ultimate test decades ago, what did that say about the nature of intelligence and the assumptions both species had been making about each other? The silver ship descended through Earth's atmosphere 3 days ahead of schedule, catching everyone by surprise. Government officials scrambled to prepare for the aliens' return, but this time, the mood in the hastily arranged meeting room was completely different from their first encounter. Ambassador Rodriguez stood at the head of a table covered with completed alien grids, laptop computers displaying Sudoku-solving applications, and several well-worn puzzle books. Next to him sat Mrs. Chen, who had become something of a celebrity since her television appearance, and Tom Wilson, a retired accountant who held the world record for solving expert-level Sudoku puzzles in under 3 minutes. Dr. Emily Watson, who had spent the past month coordinating the global research effort, couldn't help but smile as she watched Tharn materialize in the center of the room. The alien's confident, almost condescending demeanor from their first meeting was about to receive a significant shock. "Greetings, people of Earth," Tharn began, his multifaceted eyes scanning the assembled humans. "We have returned to evaluate your progress with the logic grid of supreme understanding. Based on our experience with other species, we expect you have made some initial progress in understanding the basic principles." Ambassador Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Actually, Tharn, we've completed the test. In fact, we'd like to discuss some interesting discoveries we've made about your logic grid." The alien's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "Completed? Impossible. Even our most gifted scholars require years to achieve basic competency. You have had less than 30 rotations of your planet." Mrs. Chen stood up slowly, holding a freshly completed grid. "Excuse me, dear, but your test is really just what we call a Sudoku puzzle. We've been solving these for fun for about 40 years now." Tharn's compound eyes focused on the elderly woman with an expression that the universal translator couldn't quite interpret. "You are claiming that our most sacred intellectual challenge is recreational?" "Oh yes, very relaxing," Mrs. Chen replied cheerfully. "I usually do 2 or 3 of them every morning with my coffee. Would you like me to show you how?" For the next hour, Mrs. Chen walked Tharn through the solving process with the same patient, grandmotherly approach she might use to teach a child how to tie their shoes. She explained basic techniques like scanning for obvious placements, elimination of possibilities, and logical deduction patterns that Sudoku enthusiasts had been using for decades. Tharn watched in fascination, occasionally asking questions through the translator device. His body language suggested growing amazement and possibly embarrassment. "These techniques," Tharn said slowly, "you developed them specifically for our test?" Tom Wilson chuckled and pulled out his smartphone. "No, we've had apps for this stuff for years. Look here, this program can generate thousands of puzzles at different difficulty levels. Kids play these games on the school bus." The alien leader activated his own communication device and spoke rapidly in his native language. The response seemed to agitate him even more. "You are telling me," Tharn said carefully, "that what my species has considered the pinnacle of logical reasoning for 3 millennia is something your children solve for entertainment." Dr. Watson stepped forward with a tablet displaying puzzle statistics. "We estimate that approximately 200 million humans can solve these puzzles. We have difficulty rankings from beginner to expert, and some people can complete the hardest versions in under 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Tharn's voice carried a tone of disbelief that needed no translation. Mrs. Chen patted the alien's arm gently. "Don't feel bad, dear. Everyone starts somewhere. The trick is to practice regularly and not overthink it. Would you like me to give you some easier ones to start with?" The silence that followed was profound. Tharn stood motionless for almost a full minute, presumably communicating with his ship or his home world. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its previous authority. "We must reconsider our evaluation methods. This is unprecedented in galactic history. No species has ever demonstrated such widespread competency with the logic grid. Most civilizations have only a small number of individuals who can achieve mastery." Ambassador Rodriguez sensed an opportunity. "Perhaps this suggests that our species think about these problems differently. We don't treat them as sacred challenges but as enjoyable exercises. Maybe that different perspective has value." Tharn's compound eyes seemed to brighten. "Different perspective. Yes, this is illuminating. Your species approaches logical challenges with what you call enjoyment rather than reverence. This may explain the widespread competency." Dr. Watson pulled up more data on her tablet. "We've also developed variations and hybrid puzzles over the years. Diagonal Sudoku, irregular grid Sudoku, 16x16 grids, overlapping puzzles. We could share those techniques with your people if you're interested." The alien's reaction was immediate and intense. "Variations? You have created new forms of the logic grid? Show me these immediately." For the next 2 hours, the humans demonstrated puzzle variations that had been developed by enthusiasts and puzzle creators over the decades. Tharn absorbed every technique, asked detailed questions about the logical principles involved, and even attempted to solve some of the simpler examples himself. "This is remarkable," he finally said. "Your species has taken our most advanced logical framework and expanded it in directions we never considered. You have created an entire culture around what we treated as a singular sacred achievement." Mrs. Chen smiled warmly. "That's the thing about puzzles, dear. Once you understand the basic idea, you start wondering what else you can do with it. It's human nature to tinker and improve things." Tharn activated his communication device again, this time for an extended conversation in his native language. The exchange seemed heated and complex, with multiple voices contributing from what was presumably his ship. When the conversation ended, Tharn turned back to the humans with what appeared to be a formal posture. "The Corvani High Council has made an unprecedented decision. Not only has your species passed the trial of cognitive worthiness, but you have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our expectations by several orders of magnitude. We would like to propose a cultural exchange program." Ambassador Rodriguez tried to maintain diplomatic composure, but couldn't hide his relief. "What kind of exchange are you proposing?" "We would like to invite your puzzle experts to visit our homeworld as honored teachers. In exchange, we offer to share our systematic approaches to logical analysis and pattern recognition. Together, our species might develop new forms of cognitive challenge that neither could achieve alone." Mrs. Chen clapped her hands together with delight. "Oh, that sounds wonderful. I've never been to another planet before. Do you think they have good tea there?" The retirement home in Toledo, Ohio had never received so much attention. Government officials, university researchers, and alien diplomats came and went on a daily basis, all seeking the wisdom of Mrs. Chen and her fellow residents who had become Earth's unexpected ambassadors to the galaxy. 6 months after first contact, the cultural exchange program had transformed both human and alien societies in ways nobody could have predicted. Mrs. Chen had returned from her 3-week visit to the Corvani homeworld with stories that sounded like science fiction, but were documented reality. "Their planet is beautiful," she told the gathered reporters and scientists in the retirement home's recreation room. "Very organized, very clean. But the poor dears had been making their puzzles so much harder than they needed to be. I showed them some simple techniques, and now their young people are solving logic grids faster than their scholars ever imagined possible." The transformation hadn't been limited to puzzle solving. The Corvani approach to systematic analysis, combined with human intuitive problem solving, had created new hybrid techniques that were revolutionizing how both species approached complex challenges. Research stations had been established in Earth orbit, where human puzzle enthusiasts worked alongside alien logicians to explore mathematical concepts that neither species had discovered alone. Tom Wilson, the retired accountant with the world record-solving time, had become the first human to hold a teaching position at a Corvani educational institution. His video reports from the alien world showed classroom scenes that looked remarkably familiar despite the exotic setting. "The students here are incredibly bright," he explained to his webcam while young Corvani scholars practiced solving puzzles in the background. "They just needed to learn that it's okay to make mistakes and try different approaches. Once they understood that puzzles are meant to be fun rather than stressful, their progress accelerated dramatically. The ripple effects extended far beyond puzzle solving. The realization that their most sacred intellectual challenge was another species' casual entertainment had forced the Corvani to reconsider many of their fundamental assumptions about intelligence, creativity, and cultural development. They had begun exploring other aspects of human recreational mathematics, discovering rich traditions of word games, mechanical puzzles, and strategic thinking games that had evolved organically across Earth's cultures. Dr. Emily Watson, who had been appointed as Earth's first director of interstellar educational exchange, was reviewing reports from collaborative research projects when her assistant knocked on her office door. "Dr. Watson, we just received a priority message from the Corvani ship. They've encountered another species, and they're requesting human consultation." Emily smiled as she read the transmission. The Vegan Collective, a species from a star system 40 light-years away, had presented their own version of a cognitive worthiness test. The Corvani had recognized it as something that might be familiar to humans and were asking for puzzle expert consultation. "Let me guess," Emily said to her assistant. "Their ultimate test of intelligence is something we've seen before?" The attached image made Emily laugh out loud. The vegan test was an elaborate three-dimensional structure with colored spheres that needed to be arranged according to complex rules. It looked sophisticated and alien, but the underlying logic was unmistakably familiar. "Get me Professor Williams from the Rubik's Cube World Championship Committee," Emily said. "I think we're going to need his expertise." Meanwhile, the retirement home had become an informal embassy where alien visitors came to learn from Earth's most experienced puzzle solvers. Mrs. Chen had been joined by a rotating group of volunteers who taught everything from crosswords to chess problems to visiting Corvani scholars. The most remarkable development had been the emergence of hybrid puzzles that combined human creativity with Corvani systematic analysis. These new challenges were more complex and sophisticated than either species had created alone, but they maintained the human insight that puzzles should be enjoyable rather than stressful. Young humans and Corvani were collaborating on puzzle designs that pushed the boundaries of logical reasoning while remaining accessible to enthusiasts of both species. The latest creation was a four-dimensional Sudoku variant that existed only in virtual reality, but could be solved using techniques derived from traditional paper and pencil methods. Mrs. Chen, now 83 and Earth's most famous puzzle ambassador, was working on her daily crossword when she received a video call from Tharn. The Corvani leader had become a regular correspondent, often seeking advice on educational matters or simply chatting about the latest puzzle developments. "Mrs. Chen," Tharn's translated voice carried warmth that had been completely absent during their first meeting. "I have news that might interest you. The Galactic Council has voted to adopt human-style recreational mathematics as a standard educational tool throughout known space." Mrs. Chen looked up from her crossword with satisfaction. "That's wonderful, dear. I always said puzzles were good for the mind. Will you be needing more teachers?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We've identified 17 more species whose intelligence tests appear to be variations of games and puzzles from your world. The Council has requested that Earth establish a formal academy of recreational intelligence to train teachers for the entire galaxy." Mrs. Chen chuckled as she filled in another clue. "An academy, you say? That sounds very fancy. I suppose we could do that as long as we remember that the most important thing is to have fun with it. The moment you start taking puzzles too seriously, you miss the whole point." "Wise words, as always," Tharn replied. "Oh, and Mrs. Chen? The Vegan Collective's test that we mentioned last week? Professor Williams confirmed it's what you call a three-dimensional Rubik's Cube variant. We'll need someone to teach their scholars the solving methods." Mrs. Chen smiled and returned to her crossword. "Send them over, dear. We'll sort them out. After all, it's just another puzzle." As alien ships came and went from Earth orbit, carrying puzzle enthusiasts and teachers between worlds, humanity had found its unexpected role in the galactic community. They weren't the most technologically advanced species, or the most militarily powerful, or even the most scientifically sophisticated. But they had mastered something that apparently no other species had quite figured out: the art of making complex thinking enjoyable. The universe, it turned out, was full of species who had developed profound intellectual challenges, but had forgotten how to have fun with them. Earth's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't advanced technology or military might, but the simple recognition that learning should be enjoyable, and that the best way to solve difficult problems is often to approach them with curiosity and playfulness rather than stress and reverence. Mrs. Chen finished her crossword, satisfied with another puzzle completed, and wondered what tomorrow would bring to her quiet retirement home that had become the center of intergalactic education.